Hello, everyone, for showing up to our final Crip Conversations of the semester. Um, we are super excited to be here talking with Patty Berne from Sins Invalid and Disability Justice and everything that they're going to be talking about. I'm a huge fan. So I have been very good about not fangirling right now. I just want you to know that I am like full masking. Um, so I am lucky enough to be collaborating with LGBTQ studies on this and with Texas Center for Disability Studies and Steve Hicks School of Social Work, all at UT Austin. We have all collaborated and co-conspiratorially come together to bring Patty here via Zoom. I'm super excited for everyone to be here. I would like to do a land acknowledgement before we fully get started, and I do want to apologize if my pronunciation is off at all. So in this land acknowledgement, UT, we would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the indigenous lands of Turtle Island, the ancestral name for what now is called North America. Moreover, we would like to acknowledge the Alabama Coushatta, Otto, Carrizo Comecrudo, Coahuiltecan, Comanche, Kickapoo, Lipan Apache, Tonkawa, and Isleta del Sur Pueblo, and all the American Indian and Indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas. That is from our program in Native American and Indigenous Studies here at UT. For a visual description of myself, I am a white woman with pink hair and blackish bangs, green frame, and I have a white flowered button up, and I have silver earrings in, and I have earbuds in my ear, and my background is a green screen of a library so that you do not see the chaos that is my office behind me. I am going to now get over to Patty Berne, who everyone is here to actually see and not me. I just wanted to make sure I got all of the acknowledgements for all of the folks who have made this possible. But I am Dr. Nick Winges-Yanes from Texas Center for Disability Studies and Steve Hicks School of Social Work. I lead the Crip Conversations, and it's really the most fun part of my job. And so I'm very happy to be talking to you, Patty.
Thank you so much, Nick, for the invitation, and Javier for all that you're doing to support the program going well. And before I go into my long list of thank yous, I want to give a visual description, which is that I am on screen with red lipstick and shoulder ties on a dress, and two necklaces, and I'm a light-skinned Japanese, Haitian, first generation born in the US person. I am very excited to be here, and really honored for all the work that people have put into making this happen. My colleague Karina, who is currently off camera but has been very present in the making of, and all the folks at Sins who are fantastic. Sins Invalid is a disability justice-based movement building organization. We are both a movement building and a cultural project led by disabled artists of color, centralizing queer, trans, and gender variant gender non-conforming artists. And we explore both in our movement building work and in our cultural work. We explore disability, the disabled body, and the more broad global body. I want to acknowledge that I am on Ohlone land, historically unceded, and it's currently known as the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. I use they and she pronouns. And if, folks have any access needs, you might have heard this term before, anything that allows you to access the next program that most comfortably, please take a minute and do so. Like, it's so fine. I'm hopeful that we all take care of ourselves, and please do what you need to do to take care of your body minds. You might want to take a moment now to feel into your body and articulate any access needs that you have that we may be able to assist you with into the chat. And if it's something that we can help you with, my colleague Karina will help work it out. And this is an example of collective access. It may be something like, very specific. And we couldn't send someone into your home to do it because that hasn't been pre-established. But perhaps it's for me to slow down. Please just articulate it into the chat. And with that, I want to start off with a piece of writing that was offered by Aurora Levens Morales, who wrote, "There is no neutral body from which our bodies deviate. Society has written deep into each strand of tissue of every living person on earth. What it writes into the heart muscles of 5-star generals is distinct from what it writes in the pancreatic tissue and intestinal tracts of Black single mothers in Detroit, of Mexicana migrants in Fresno, of 5-star generals. But no body stands outside the consequences of injustice and inequality." And I think in her brilliance, she really captures that we all have bodies that have lived experiences of oppression, even if it's only the adultism that we experienced as children. And that in every community, there are disabled people. We've all internalized lots of oppressive and inaccurate ideas around disability and how we, quote unquote, read disability. The dominant framework of disability in this ableist, white supremacist, cis heteronormative, patriarchal, colonial, capitalist country defines disability as fixed or static, and likely something visible, as something that's an individual tragedy, and that defines people's ability. Further, under the medical model, many manifestations of our bodies are seen as wrong or sick or unproductive. And not just the bodies of people with disabilities, but of women, of immigrants, of people who don't comply with expectations of gender. We have, many of us, been seen as deviant or damaged or dangerous. People who are incarcerated, people of color. We are all seen as undermining society. For example, queers, that we might corrupt the young, or Crips polluting the gene pool of living undesirable lives, that we are tragic, that we are better off dead, and that we are unfit for the workplace. And ironically, we often represent that which is deeply desired but not allowed within ableist, white supremacist, patriarchal, cis heteronormative, colonial capitalism, like the free expressions of ourselves and our genders. Our human need for care. It's not just people with disabilities that have strengths and needs. It's everybody that has strengths and needs. And the truth of our collective interdependence. That is not something that belongs only in conversations about the forest. That is right in there in the conversations about how we live as humans. And the desire for connection, to create chosen family. And within a disability justice framework, we acknowledge that these ways of being are legitimate, that we are multi-gendered, that we are multi-abilitied, and simultaneously very fragile. And we understand disability as a lived, embodied experience, not a medical experience, as a political identity, which is framed within ableism, and a community location from which to organize, but also a political location that overlaps and intersects and responds with other political locations, such as our race, our genders, our relationship to money and class, nation state, and so many other kind of political locations. And disability is also an aesthetic from which we practice and create culture. I see something happening in the chat. Is everything good, Karina?
I don't have access to the chat, so I can't see.
Okay. So, you know, one of the pieces that's really critical is for cultural work to identify the I and the we in terms of movement building. And within a disability justice framework, we understand that we need to, excuse me, we need to resonate the I and the we, mirror it back to people. And that, you know, disabled folks, we have our own specific histories and cultures and experiences of resistance. And I would really love for folks to understand and know those histories and the narratives of oppression, violence against people with disabilities, and all of the good resilient strategies that we have developed to survive. And there are many great resources to learn from about these histories, but this conversation is not going to provide that. In this one conversation, what we're going to assume is that there have been many political assaults on disabled individuals and communities, particularly against disabled people of color, disabled non-binary folks, disabled trans folks, disabled women, everything from state violence, like eugenic programs against people with disabilities, to sterilization programs against Native women and Puerto Rican women, Latinx women. There is interpersonal violence, like hate crimes. And it is in response to all of these injustices that people with disabilities have organized. And in 2006, there were no cultural spaces welcoming of this conversation at all. We would, when I say we, myself and Leroy Moore, the other co-founder of Sins Invalid, we might be the only artists in a group of artists that were, you know, artists of color and disabled, or in a disabled centered space, we might be the only, you know, people of color there. Or in similarly, like in a queer space, we might be the only, you know, disabled artists of color. Whoa, that was a really loud notification. Sorry about that. So, you know, all that to say, when we are multiply marginalized, all these intersecting forms of oppression further and further push us out of the mainstream of discord. conversation, and further into discord, really. And one of the things that we have to understand about oppression that is against multiply marginalized folks is that this oppression is inscribed on our skin, like on our bodies. It's our bodies that have become problematized. And I think it's, kind of similar to the way that trans and non-binary people have this, have had the same experience in a very significant way. And because of that, we knew that kind of representing our bodies in a new way was part of the organizing strategy that we had to adopt. So specifically within ableism, our sexualities are used against us, neutering us or sterilizing us, marking us as hypersexual. And of course, this isn't just, people with disabilities. It's, reproduction has been used as a tool of oppression against, again, Black and Indigenous women, Latinx women. And all of it is offensive and incredibly painful. And again, a place from which we can hold ourselves dear and important, and a place from which we can organize. So with that, I would love for you all to start seeing a bit of the visual narrative, the performance organizing, so to speak, the cultural organizing that Sins Invalid has done. And I'm going to turn it over to our colleague Javier to facilitate that. Karina, will you push me back?
Sex and disability are two words that you don't often hear together. And if you do, it's like, oh, those people have sex?
Tonight, we will be new maps, creating new constellations for our collective bodies and shapes to create what freedom and love can look like, feel like, taste like, without any perfect body, any perfect shape or form, without assuming any single way of thinking or desire. There is no right or wrong body of a conscious, revolutionary mind.
Leroy Moore and I are comrades and the best of friends. We've both been disabled since birth, and we saw that our creative works around our bodies and our sexuality had no venue, that there was no place where we could celebrate our bodies as beautiful and disabled and hot. So we decided to start Sins Invalid, a disability justice performance project on disability and sexuality.
Remember when we first met? when I went to your house to do some peer counseling, you broke your neck in a car accident. Your friends thought I should come over and hang out. You know, mentor you about things like, I don't know, getting crushed in an accident. Remember how even after we stopped dating, we both promised that when you finally got that van with the lift you'd been waiting for, that I would come down for a visit and we would have one last escapade. I remember you driving rural back roads and me in the passenger seat, doing as much as I possibly could to distract you. When I got down on my knees, pulled out your cock, and started pumping it, then sucking on it vigorously, my head up and down in your lap, your breath and volume increased, and impulsively you pulled the car over. The sun was setting, and we witnessed the gorgeous transformation of the sky from the inside of the van. Your fingers do not move easily, but you can grasp many an object. And you did so that evening, inserting different shapes into my cunt. Slowly, in and out, fixated, staring at the entrance and exit of the end of each bottle, dildo, organic vegetable. I screamed at the top of my lungs while I came and came and came.
I learned to survive on my own. And on my own, I learned about sex and love and confused the two at times. As I found myself trying to define womanhood and the white, heterosexual, able-bodied impossibility of things. Because I was raised to believe I will never have sex, never get married, never have children, never grow up, never grow up. We all have to define ourselves and find our own way of feeling beautiful. When it comes to my body is in many ways imperfect if it was to be seen through the lens of society's expectations of beauty. I touch the soft velvet skin of my legs and my feet. How delicate they are, how innocent they are. Despite the horrors they were forced to live, despite the orthopedic shoes and braces that once imprisoned them, or the hard cast that made nightmares itch and monsters crawl under the sheets. The memory of white coats and indifferent hands treating my legs as if they were just another example of what a cripple looks like. Another example of what a cripple looks like. Another example of what a cripple looks like.
It used to be the case, I don't actually know if it's still the case, but it used to be the case in many schools that doctors would go to schools, doctors and physicians in training would go to schools for kids with disabilities and essentially learn about different physical conditions by watching children with disabilities. And at the school that I went to in San Francisco, literally, like, I was paraded around naked for doctors to look at and kind of essentially point out what they thought was, well, how in their framework would be considered like flaws or pathologies.
1914, Harry Laughlin from the Eugenics Record Office categorized the 5 Ds of those who should not reproduce.
Degenerate,
Dependent,
deficient,
delinquent.
defective.
Eugenics was both a social movement and state policies in which ideology and science combined to selectively breed the human population. In the United States, 27 states had eugenic sterilization laws. By 1924, the state of Virginia had a draft Eugenic Sterilization Act, which called for sterilizations
directed at giving the doctors at the colony the legal backing they needed for sterilizing patients. Colony officials decided to test whether the Sterilization Act was constitutional and selected a young woman from the colony as the test case, Carrie Buck.
My name is Carrie. My mom lived in that colony there. So I lived with the Dobbses, my foster parents, since I was little. They treated me all right. I tried to help out around the house and such. I was sweet on Mr. Dobbs' nephew. I don't want to say his name, though. He raped me. And then the Dobbses got mad. Not at him, at me. Because I was pregnant. They started telling people that I acted up, that I wasn't right in the head. They said they didn't want me there anymore. They sent me to the colony.
The case eventually wound up in the United States Supreme Court, which decided in 1927 in an 8-1 vote to uphold the Virginia decision to sterilize Carrie. The majority opinion in the case was written by Oliver Wendell Holmes and included the famous statement, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." 60,000 sterilizations are documented to have been performed in the United States from 1910 to 1970. Scores of additional sterilizations have occurred but have not been documented.
Have you been selected for genetic deselection? Have you been used as an argument for abortion? Have you been asked not to breed? Have you been called sick, queer, crazy? Have you been called feeble-minded, insane, deviant, a disease? Have you been called needing a cure, genetically inferior? Have you been called less than human, a punishment, an impurity, a sin?
Most artists with disabilities have not had a chance to incubate their work. So we are going to pause the film there. And thanks. And I think we are, I'm going to just intersect or interact with the film for just a minute or two, and also make sure that we have the interpreters on screen while the film is going when we go back into the film. So one thing I just wanted to note is that, you know, the oppression that happens with us and our resistance to it. I mean, it's really visceral, and that is part of what we were depicting in the MC, Kara Page, who some of y'all might know, and Leroy Moore, who some of y'all might know, in their piece about like the disabled artists and essentially metabolizing people's projections and holding it for people. And how different that would be if it were a different, if there was a white person who is being the narrator and anyone other than a white person receiving those projections, or how it would be if it were someone who is a cis male feeding those projections into someone else's mouth, and how that would so substantially change the power dynamics in the piece. But regardless, you know, again, what we're trying to communicate, what I was trying to communicate was kind of the visceral ways in which all the power dynamics that we have spoken about can be captured in like a visual haiku almost. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but really condensed down. And I also wanted to note that the use of shame and the release of shame and how powerful that can be in the opening piece. Ellery, rather E.T. Russian, was really joyful, and part of the power of that piece was their not holding on to other people's trips about their body, and in fact playing with the assumptions that people like, oh, I shouldn't look, oh, but I'm curious, oh, but maybe it's not okay, oh, but maybe it's sexy, is it okay to feel sex, you know, turned on by this, like, you know, all the different reactions people would have just by looking at another person's legs, because they're different than, you know, perhaps an able-bodied person's legs, because we're only supposed to see not just a pair of legs, they're supposed to be young legs. We're supposed to look at, you know, hairless legs. We're supposed to look at like this laundry list of, you know, characteristics that are acceptable, and nothing outside of that. And the power that has, and we're like, actually, like, all legs are good legs. And again, I just wanted to point out the Carrie Buck piece played with, well, I don't want to say played, but enacted or discussed, I guess, the forms of reproductive violence that happens and happened against poor women, disabled women, you know, and even more so, you know, as kind of the systems of oppression are piled on, you know, poor and disabled and indigenous, you know, poor and disabled and indigenous and not thought of as part of this nation state, etc. So all of that, you know, was in play in that piece, which, and I think the actor Seeley pulled it off really well, trying to convey all of that. That was a really fun collaboration. Anyway, okay, back to that film, which is starting with Matt Fraser.
You know, it's very powerful when all your life you go to the theatre, and I'm speaking from my own younger experience, and you see lives depicted on stage, and then suddenly, for once, you see something to do with your life depicted on stage. It blows your mind. And this is what we're doing to the audience. Finally, they're seeing aspects of their lives being opened out, discussed on stage.
You're such a beautiful freak. I wish there were more just like you. You're not like all of the others, and that is why I love you. Beautiful freak, beautiful freak. That is why I love you. Beautiful freak, beautiful freak.
If you're turning on the TV and reading your magazine and even looking around you, and you're not seeing disabled sexuality, you're not seeing disabled people be sexual, and you're a Crip, like, what are you to think? How are you supposed to model being a sexual person? Disabled people, myself included, oftentimes have less access to sex, to pleasurable, consensual, mind-blowing fucking. People are asexualized a lot. I'm often in queer settings and in settings generally, which are highly sexually charged, in which I can sort of feel I'm like testing the borders of unfuckability. It's easy to fall into the trap of proving that you're sexual despite your disability. My sexuality, my sexual identity, my gender identity derives directly out of my disabled body. And that is what I want to sexualize. That is what I want to politicize.
A lot of what I do as director is give the performers and the entire space, the entire theater, a place where we are essentially controlling the terms of debate. We're orienting the gaze. We're determining what and how we're being perceived.
I don't see you as disabled. Maybe a little different.
Did your mother feel guilty?
How could you provide for her?
It must be. You need help for making love. You need help for making love.
Oh, it must be awful. Do you need help for making love? You can work in the storeroom, but not at the register.
Looking at your arms makes me feel sick. Sorry.
Watching you pick up that bag was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You have lovely eyes.
Take your newborn child to the river and drown him. You need to take the prostate.
Yes. With a handicap.
But I don't think I could ever do it with a, or a cripple. Oh no, I couldn't fuck a disabled person.
I couldn't ever fuck a cripple.
I couldn't ever fuck a cripple.
When we open a show, the excitement is palpable. There's
Hi again, everyone. So one thing to note is that we are not having this piece of film interpreted because the ASL interpreters didn't feel like it was appropriate, to, I'm looking for where exactly to read it from. Our apologies for the lack of ASL interpretation during this film. Unfortunately, our ASL team didn't have time to prepare for the film. Our next film will have ASL on screen. And if people want to actually see the entire film that we just were seeing with ASL interpretation on screen, it's available for free on Canopy, which most places, most libraries have, but you have to pay like in library credit, so to speak. Even if it's a public library, you get like a certain amount of credits a month, and then you can use those to watch films. So that's how you can watch the film Sins Invalid, an unshamed claim to beauty in the face of invisibility. You can also watch it on newday.com, which is an education distributor, and you can rent it there. We would appreciate your renting it. If you want to watch it on Canopy, go for it. And then next, well, I think it kind of speaks for itself, though kind of undermining of ableism through the demonstration of Crip beauty. I think that was really wonderful to see. And also, Leslie's arms and the grace in her movement while she was talking about walking along the borders of unfuckability. But let's go back to watching the last piece from the Sins Invalid film.
Was this desire safe? Is this safe? Are you safe? Are you sufficiently insulated from us, the deviant, the disabled, the non-normative, the crippled, or might you become stained by our leaking needs? Are we, the disabled, the unconscious visceral threat to the able-bodied myth of emotional predictability and bodily control? Is that why you settle most comfortably in your mental lazy boy as we labor to shield you from our differences? Is that why you contain us in institutions, police our bodies and movements, abuse us, exterminate us, eliminate us even before birth? Do we frighten you so? Must we frighten you? Living requires risk, as does the hottest of desires. We live in continual risk. And tonight, we are coming home.
Awesome. There's so much that could be said about that, but I think I'll just leave it to say that I'd always wanted to crucify somebody in a chair, because that's what happens to us, and I wanted to depict that. Maybe we can go now into our next film, which is called Loving with Three Hearts. And that does have interpretation on stage.
An octopus has 3 hearts. 1, 2, 3. Each heart has a slightly different role in propelling the octopus's glorious body through the murky depths of the ocean. To taste, touch, feel, pulse, all 3 hearts must work together. In our collective movement toward liberation, with every body-mind unique and essential to the whole, we each have different roles to fill. It is a collective effort to propel our movements forward, a collective effort to keep our movements alive. The title of this documentary reflects the collective spirit and nature of Crip body minds, the praxis of disability justice, and the future worlds we co-create. Loving with Three Hearts, a Sins Invalid production.
Ableism is so fucked up real.
It is so.
You know, it is so real and so painful. It's just a different kind of oppression. This oppression that the non-disabled world does not
understand.
Yeah.
They don't comprehend.
Oh, do you want to take off the mask like during it while you're speaking?
Working on this project during the pandemic was quite interesting.
It's interesting.
It's been pretty interesting.
It's so beautiful to be able to be working with artists and working creatively again. But the pandemic certainly adds a lot of layers of difficulty.
I feel like even still to this day, 6-7 months into the pandemic, it still seems something like out of a movie.
So this is the tight shot that you don't want it to come. This is coming from the side.
We didn't know, how to do it. Like, there's never been a pandemic. We're in the midst of like an international rebellion against anti-Black violence. We're in the midst of, a potential fascist takeover. I think the hard part was the timing, because we had to, move and pivot very quickly.
So even though we weren't exactly at the beginning of pandemic, we were at the beginning of people figuring out how to still do theater and performance during a pandemic.
Having to figure out, making sure that everybody in my team, everybody that was associated with this project was very cautious and aware of how COVID was and how we make our space safe and clean. It has been the number one thing to have to focus on. Than just normal, where do we go, what do we do, what do we eat?
The theaters are adapting to COVID. You can't have a theater production. People can't go to the theater. So they're like, what do we do now? Oh, we do this like streaming kind of service. But there's rules about how many people could be in a space at a time.
For the filming portion, we had to really step back and rethink how we did most everything to make sure we were being safe. I think it was harder for the performers being separated by not only the schedule, but geography as well.
I'm really used to having the energy of all of the actors and the crew, and now, I'm either in a room by myself or on the phone with Patty. What's different is really just kind of feeling isolated and really excited to see how it all comes together at the end.
I am Mistress Asthma, and I want to scare you, make you think you're dying. Maybe you will. What kind of attack are you hoping for, my sweet? The kind that will land you in the emergency room at a moment's notice? Or does the slow terror of breathlessness, building to a sharp crescendo of panic, turn you on? You told me your yeses, your maybes, and your nos. Maybe I can tap my wildfire ashes onto your face, smother you in nuclear waste, and shower you with stormwater runoff. You do want to carry the umbrella so the acid rain doesn't sting my pretty eyes. You're open to fracking, but you need to be warmed up first. I'm very interested in filling your whole atmosphere with my dirty greenhouse gases. You would like that, wouldn't you, darling?
I'm very used to being in the green room with people and having an entire week of full support. The wonderful thing about it is that Patty managed to get it done. Even though I was here in Houston, she coordinated everything with amazing people who made everything feel like almost as if I were really over there and doing it in person.
Yeah, it was really a lot of work to hire 4 theaters, but not just the theaters, but the technical crew for every site and a film crew for every site.
When we were doing the choreography, I was very proud, I was very happy and very accomplished to see what Maria was able to achieve in such a different situation, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, long distance learning, and she did amazing.
They're ready for us whenever.
All right, we're ready.
The origin of flamenco.
Hey again, everyone. So that was obviously newer work that was produced during the mass disabling event that we know is COVID-19 onward. And I just want to note that also while that was happening, there was also the development of a movement for Black lives. And simultaneously to that was this explicit privileging of some lives over others, happening outside and inside of the MIC. So that was happening while we were, putting together that performance. And I would love to open it up, and I'd be pleased to answer folks' questions or reactions to any and all of this.
Thank you for sharing all of this, all of these films. We watched your films in my class, specifically the Unashamed Claim to Beauty, every semester, I think for 4 or 5 years. And I'm really happy that there is additional videos that we can also show. So we actually started off this semester in the Crip Conversations by showing the Unashamed Claim to Beauty as a way to like open up these conversations. So while we're waiting for some of the questions to come in, you had talked a little bit about what it was like to do the performance during COVID. And I'm wondering, with all of the challenges that you had with that, was there anything that seemed that there was a good thing that came out of it? Or can you think of like a good thing that came out of that experience?
Well, I think we learned that we could do it. After doing it out, I was like, I'm never doing that again. We are never doing this again, because getting 4 theaters and 4 crew and blah, blah, all the different things that are needed, and then trying to do publicity at the same time as kind of all the editing is happening toward the end, is because on a calendar, like your peak kind of promotion is just a month out from like the premiere. And that's also when we were getting all the footage in and trying to do the editing. So it was rough, but now that we know we can do it, I mean, I think that it leaves then the opportunity for, if someone can't come in to one central location, we can then still like incorporate people from multiple geographies, which might be what we have to do because the pandemic is not getting put back in the bottle. We may do a show where most of us are there, but I don't think that it's ever going to be, it never was wholly safe and inclusive to be in a theater. And I don't think the ways in which it's more risky for us is going to decrease, particularly as climate chaos continues and more and more, frozen bacteria and, all nature of viruses are going to be in our environments. So I think it's great to know that we can do it. And I think, maybe this is very obvious, but that also means that we can include artists from other continents potentially, and try to, seam in other locations to one live stream and still have it, be visually integrated. Yeah, so there's some good things, but it's hard.
It sounded really hard. I think the creativity that has come out of it has been really, really fascinating. Demetria has posted in the Q&A, have you seen any progressive steps forward with this advocacy work that you are all doing?
Progressive steps forward, I would say, to some extent, there's certainly been more conversation around disability justice, and we've seen more cultural spaces open up. We've seen more people identifying as disabled, because disability, the concept of disability was kind of pulled out of exclusively disability rights frameworks, so that, people from basically, from outside of the disability rights world are more comfortable identifying as disabled. So I think that has been, and I think that, there's been so much like resonance in terms of how people see themselves, and that there's been like, like a second and third generation kind of people that have come up in disability justice. And that's really, really exciting to me. More broadly, I think we can all acknowledge that while it may be in its dying throes, capitalism is winning. It's not on its heels. Like justice movements, we're on our heels, so to speak. We're like, that comes from a boxing metaphor, and I only recently started understanding what that meant. So let me say it's like their like monopolization of resources has only gotten more and more concentrated. And so in that sense, like, yeah, like humans are not winning. More and more species are lost every day. The planet is is struggling because of our behavior. And we all lose. Yeah.
I would say that part of bringing you here is because of the work that you have done and the way that your work has transformed what many of us know from disability rights to disability justice, but also this more collective movement. And I say this as a preface to the next question, and that Annalie asked, how can we embody the message in your advocacy work within our own lives? And I think that this is a question that a lot of students that I teach have. And so I too am curious what you would say to that.
How do we embody a message of justice and power and beauty in our own lives? I think, thank you. Yeah, I think justice is a praxis, just like everything else. And, you know, we might have an idea of what is fair and just, but, you know, it doesn't happen out there. And then we can be inappropriate mini tyrants in our own lives. Like, you know, are we always perfect? No, of course not. You know, we're human. Like, am I going to have moments where I slip up? Of course. But like, my intention is to, you know, be advocating for justice, like in the world and in my own life. And, you know, I think that when we think about culture, we tend to think about broad sweeps of, like, you know, a Nike ad or, you know, something very grand and affects, you know, 1 million people. I don't think there's a scale in terms of justice. There's not like, you know, it only means something if it affects more than, you know, 5 people, 10 people, 1,000 people, 1 million people. Like, I think that being kind and loving is important in every context and in every way that we can be. And I really believe, because of my hard-earned lessons, I really do believe it starts with how we treat ourselves. And that means not like being like self-indulgently, like narcissistically, like I'm perfect at everything. But no, like, you know, most of us have been taught to feel crappy about ourselves, you know, and especially for folks that, you know, have been marginalized and or oppressed and or, you know, experience violence, etc., like even more so. And we know that for people with disabilities, you know, 8 out of 10 of us have experienced violence. So like, that really means like learning to love ourselves and appreciating, you know, the ways in which only we can inhabit our body minds. It was really meaningful for me when I heard someone say, you know, there's never been a Patty Berne before. You know, there's never been a Karina before. There's never been, you know, any of us before. And there will never be again in all of history. And so if we don't contribute and give all of that we can now, like it'll never happen. Whatever I can do, only I can do, and I can only do it now. So like, you know, it's a really wonderful invitation to be who I am. And I would encourage people to be your fabulous you.
I have one last question. I'm sorry, I am legit tearing up, so I'm sorry. I have one last question from Gabby, which is what keeps you going? What keeps you all creative, innovative, joyous when things get hard, when there is a collective feeling of the oppression, pain, burden carried and perpetuated?
And I think tears are really good for us. We don't cry enough.
I agree.
I mean, I can't speak for other members of Sins, but I feel like all of us have been very encouraged to be in relationships with each other and with people in our lives. And like, I know for me, like the people in my life, like I really would not be doing well were it not for the people that I love that love me. And I wouldn't be doing well if my work didn't give me meaning. Like, I think as beings, like we don't find meaning, we make meaning. And I need to make meaning in the world around me. And even if that's my own micro world with my kitty, you know, like I matter to her and she matters to me, you know. And I mean, I'm very blessed. I think many of us don't have access, like Leslie was saying, to relationships. And, you know, I feel very, actually, I don't think it's like technically a blessing. I think it's technically dumb luck that some people find partners that they click with. And I happen to. I've been with the same person for going on 18 years. And yeah, that helps. And you know, DJ praxis, like actual praxis, helps a lot. Like, which in many ways it's like reflecting to each other that we have worth, and that because we have worth, like we deserve to eat. So like, you know, we're always telling each other, I'm always telling my colleague, it's like, I'm sorry to bother you, but like, can I order some? I'm like, it is a pleasure, please tell me what you want, let me make it happen, you know. And like, it's part of what the organization will support is like food for, you know, people that are working. Why? Because people need to eat. It's not that complicated. So like actually living our politics has like, yeah, that has a lot of meaning. And having made a space where we can practice that has made a lot of meaning for me. Yeah. Also want to a lot of violence. I act out my aggression through watching mixed martial arts and really violent movies. So, yeah.
I think that was the last of the Q&A. I'm a big fan of rage rooms, which I have found recently. So, is there anything that you would like to leave us with? I mean, you just like shared a bunch of wisdom and beautiful words. So I don't want to put you on the spot again. But as our time is ending, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time, is there anything that you would like to leave us at UT Austin with?
Well, I think folks that have chosen to be in Texas and are kind of staying in struggle there, like congratulations that you are staying in struggle. It is no joke whatsoever. And Texas has a lot of needs. And a lot has a need for love and support for organizers. And a lot of love and need for all the communities that are being harmed in Texas. And I think that, yeah, you all have your hands full. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be with you all, because I have really wonderful friends in Texas. And yeah, thank you very much. There are some links, I think, being dropped into the chat, and please look us up. Hey, check out our work online. Hit us up if you want to like volunteer or, have something that you want to talk with us about. Like, email takes time because it requires moving fingers. But please be patient and you'll hear back from us.
Yes, I will. There are links in there for the Sins Invalid Disability Justice Primer and the newsletter and the coloring book, which if you wanted to see any of those and you were on campus, you can come to my office and just look at some of them to get an idea. There's also a survey evaluation link in there from Javi, who is just an amazing support person, and I always forget to do those things, so I'm so grateful that he's here. I am so grateful that you are sharing space with us tonight. So thank you for being here, Patty. Thank you for sharing all of this, and thank you for giving many students of mine, I think, just a ray of hope and sunshine that I think seems very far away mid-semester, and especially now where we are. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate it very much, and you.
Thank you. All right, everyone, I am going to stop recording here, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. Thank you for our last Crip Conversations of the semester. We will be back next semester. Please be on the lookout. Thank you also to the Disability Cultural Center here on campus, which has just started this year. So we will keep on doing this, all of this next semester. So thank you.
Awesome. Good night.